And that's how you validate yourself through it. As you feel the impulse to over-explain, is you say to yourself, this is what I'm doing, is I just say, I don't have to tell them the whole story. If they knew the whole story, if they had all of the context, if I did send this massive essay explaining all of the ins and outs and all my day and all this, I feel this, blah, blah, blah. If I did send all of that, if they did have the context, they would understand. The key to this is to be able to face your character defects and learn to trust yourself and validate yourself and stop caring what other people think. So the first question to ask yourself is, why am I over-explaining? And that's a big question, and it's difficult to know how to answer that as well, because you might think, why am I over-explaining? Oh, it's because I want people to like me. But there are layers behind that on a conscious level you're not necessarily aware of until you really take a look at this, which is why we're doing a whole video about it. I am definitely a lot better at this than I was. I used to over-explain a lot, and it's really just through practice that you start to trust yourself and trust other people as well. Why are you over-explaining? Now, this could be a few different things. For me, it's definitely a control thing. I want to control people's expectations of me. I want to control what they know, I guess. So I want to over-explain and give them all the information so that they can see things from my perspective, and so they can see, oh, she's not a bad person, the reason she had to cancel this, or the reason she is apologizing or whatever, and over-explaining, it's for all of these things, right? And that impulse can be, that's an understandable impulse, but you can't control what other people think, and also you need to stop caring what other people think. So all these things are linked. So for me, it's definitely a control thing, but it could also be a people-pleasing thing. You could find yourself wanting to over-explain and, give your whole life story as to a justification of why you can't do a thing, or why you have to cancel, or why this isn't going to work. It might be because you are a people pleaser and you don't want anyone to be annoyed at you. So you're trying to give all of the reasons and help them to see it from your perspective. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can help to flip that around and be like, okay, if someone sends you a really long essay, or regularly sends you long essays on text, are you reading it and on board? You may well be, but you could also be, depending on the relationship as well, because if it's someone who's a close friend, you're like, yes, just happy to hear from them, like want to hear their thoughts, here for the essay. But if it's someone who's like an acquaintance or like a work colleague, or just like someone who's sort of on the periphery of your life, like a neighbor, people you see regularly but you're not necessarily really close to them, sending these people whole essays, they're probably not going to read them, and even if they do, they're going to maybe be more confused than before. This is the irony of it. In trying to be a people pleaser, or in trying to control what other people think of us by over-explaining a situation, it can have the opposite effect. Like you might think, oh, I need to explain because I need them to understand from my perspective. I need them to see why I've done this or why this is happening. But actually, through that over-explanation, they just get more annoyed at you because they're like, this is way out of proportion. Like, it doesn't matter that much, which we're also going to talk about. So thinking about why, another why could be, maybe you care too much about what other people think. You care about how you're perceived. I've been talking to some of my friends recently about how caring what other people think of you, or caring about how you're perceived, that is pride. And I'd heard of pride being like a character defect or something to work on within yourself. Notice where you're prideful. But I'd never really connected pride to caring so much about what other people think, or caring about the way that you're perceived. But it really is that, because that links to the control thing. It's saying, I want you to view me a certain way. You're trying to control someone else's perception of you. And this is like a thing that's going to take a while to unpack. But funny thing about pride, if you are hearing me talk about this and you're like, oh, I can kind of relate to that. I do really have a tendency, or I'm noticing a tendency to want to control other people's reactions to me. Once you notice it in yourself, at least this is what I found, it will be popping up all over the place. Like, I've noticed that my biggest character defects are definitely fear and pride. Those are the things that I continually find myself needing to work on, or I have to make a big decision, or even just small day-to-day things. And this fear or pride, it's one of those two that are getting in the way and disrupting my relationships with other people, or making me doubt myself. It's going to come up a lot. But in terms of over-explaining, do any of those things we've talked about so far resonate with you? Are you trying to control someone's reactions, Do you care too much about what people think? Are you trying to be a people pleaser? Are you all three, maybe, when it comes to over-explaining? Have a think about why you have this tendency to over-explain yourself. Once you know why, that's something that you can work on separately, or at least just be aware of. And then anytime you find yourself in a situation where you're sending a really long essay or you're trying to over-explain yourself, you can be like, what in this situation, in this relationship, whether it's with your boss or with your colleague or with your friend or with a family member, what is it about this that's making me either fearful or prideful or wanting to control things, wanting to be a people pleaser? Move with that awareness and keep that in the back of your mind as we then move on to trying to validate yourself. This is a big topic and I've done several videos on my channel about this, so I will link them in the description. It's difficult, and this is something I struggle with because I do want everyone to understand why. And I don't know if this comes from like wanting to be a good person and wanting people to know that you have good intentions. But also you need to remember that good intentions don't really mean anything. Like, you can still do horrible things and cause people a lot of harm, even if you have good intentions. So trying to over-explain anything and trying to, really hit the point home, like, I'm a good person, or this is why I did this, this is why I did this. Even if you have good intentions, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're never going to hurt anyone or people aren't going to get upset or whatever. But this is difficult because a lot of validating yourself, for example, when it came to oversharing, in that video we talk about oversharing, and validating yourself is a point there. But there it's more about sitting with your feelings. It can be about journaling, processing your emotions by yourself, validating how you feel before you then go share it with other people. So it's very internal. Whereas in this context of over-explaining, validating yourself is more reliant on external things, in that there are now people involved here. So you have to, when you have this impulse to over-explain and you need to hold that back, people may think worse of you. So you might have an impulse to over-explain why you're cancelling on something that you agreed to do. And maybe you have a really good reason, but I would also say, if you have a good reason, you probably don't need to over-explain it, right? If you're having a bad day and you're like, look, my mental health can't take this, or I'm feeling really ill, sorry. You don't really need to over-explain that. You just say, I'm really sorry I can't make it, I'm feeling ill. Or, I'm really sorry I can't make it, my dog is sick. I'm really sorry I can't make it, my family member's sick, I need to go help them. So if you're over-explaining, do you have a valid reason? And that can be, again, about trying to control people's perceptions and be like, oh, are they going to accept this, or are they going to believe this? Maybe that's just me coming from like a lack of trust place in terms of thinking, if I give a really simple explanation, as in, I'm not feeling well, sorry. Not that blunt, but maybe I'm then thinking they won't believe me, or they'll think that I'm lying just because maybe I don't trust other people when they say that. Even though I barely do that, it's not like I'm regularly shirking my responsibilities or saying that I'm sick when I'm not, because I can't think of the last time that I did that and was lying about it. I mean, I would say, yeah, I'm not up to that, but that would genuinely be because I'm not up to it, sorry. But that can be like another why in terms of trust issues. But this validating yourself here, it's not like you're going to sit and it's going to feel difficult, but you're going to get through it. It's involving other people, because you're going to have to sit with knowing or thinking, because so many different nuances. You might be assuming that if you don't over-explain something, someone is going to think worse of you, or they're going to be annoyed at you. But that's an assumption. In some cases, you may well be right, and it might be a correct assumption, but it is still an assumption. Don't do other people's thinking for them. Don't assume. But that in itself is also a process, and it's going to feel uncomfortable. And it's going to feel more uncomfortable than the validating yourself of like sitting with your feelings or journaling, because this is involving other people's assumptions or other people's expectations of you. And you're going to have to sit in that, knowing that other people may be making assumptions about you, or they may be thinking less of you. Whether that stuff is true or not, it's going to be difficult to sit with. But the way that you can get through that discomfort when you're feeling an urge to over-explain, it's really about trusting yourself and your reasons, and knowing that you have your own best interests at heart. So this can be a bit difficult as well, because I don't know if I would say that I am a people pleaser, but I definitely want to make sure that I'm trying to help other people. Maybe I'm doing more for others. Like, it's more that I think other people seem to be more ruthless, and I'm trying to think of like an example, because ruthless is quite a strong word, but I just don't want to presume anything. I don't want other people to think that I'm really selfish or really self-centered, so I won't act in ways I'm not going to put myself first all the time, even though I really should be. So then I think I need to over-explain myself because I'm like, oh, I don't want them to think worse of me. Who cares if I'm doing the best thing for me? But this validating yourself, you have to not only trust that you're doing the right thing for you, and like, I don't need to explain myself, I'm doing the right thing for me. I will give an explanation if I'm, not going to be able to make something. I'm not just going to say, sorry, bye. I'm going to say, sorry, I'm not feeling up to it, or something came up. However you want to phrase it. You don't have to go into the whole thing of, I'm feeling so awful, or this thing happened and then this and then this. You can. It, again, depends on the relationship. But if you are constantly over-explaining or like putting so much energy or like crafting this essay and then like deleting it or whatever, this is not helpful for you. But you have to trust, okay, I'm doing the right thing for me, and then trust that, one, other people aren't going to care that much, but two, you have to trust that they're going to take it in good faith. And I struggle with this because I know that there are people out there who act in bad faith, in terms of they will lie and they'll say that they're ill when they're not. They'll just back out of things because they're being cowardly, because they can't be bothered. So I know other people do that, and I don't want people to think that I'm doing that if all of a sudden I have to back out of something last minute. But that's me trying to control their perception of me. But I have to let go of this bad faith interpretation that I have of people thinking that she says that she's ill, but really, she's not. And then I have the impulse to over-explain, oh no, I really am ill, all this stuff happened, blah, blah, blah. You have to start thinking that people act in good faith, and just like, you say your thing, you say, I'm really sorry, I'm ill, and then that's it. And trust that if they did have the context, they would be fully on board. Like, that's how you've got to act with it, and that's how you validate yourself through it. As you feel the impulse to over-explain, but you hold off on it, is you say to yourself, this is what I'm doing, is I just say, I don't have to tell them the whole story. If they knew the whole story, if they had all of the context, if I did send this massive essay explaining all of the ins and outs and all my day and all this, I feel this, blah, blah, blah. If I did send all of that, if they did have the context, they would understand and they would accept whatever has happened has happened. So you have to fill in that and like pretend to yourself, if I gave them all the context, it would be fine. And then that helps me like soothe the discomfort that comes with not over-explaining when I would really like to give a longer explanation than I am giving. Move with trust. Trust other people. That's such a broad statement. But also trust yourself, in that trust that your good character speaks for itself. So if, like the example I gave, if you are worried that if you don't give an over-explanation, if you don't go into all of the detail, people might think that you're lying just to get out of something. Don't over-explain just to like get around that, because as well, that might have the opposite effect where they're like, the lady doth protest too much. Like, she's over-explaining so much, like, does she feel bad because she's actually making all of this up and she can make it, she just can't be bothered. It can have the opposite effect to what you want. But trust that your good character comes through in other ways. This comes with being consistent with anything, whether it's showing up to something every week or checking in with someone. Just being a consistent presence that will demonstrate, oh yeah, she really was ill that one time that she couldn't make it. If that becomes a pattern, then you're someone who's flaky, or you're someone who just can't be bothered to like show up and do whatever they agreed to do. So trust that if you are acting in good faith and you just feel this need to over-explain because you're like, oh my gosh, I want them to understand the whole story, trust that they will see that you're genuine in all other aspects. You don't have to go into detail about this thing. Just state clearly and then move on, knowing that you've acted in good faith and you just trust that they are doing the same. I think as well, it helps to remember that other people don't care that much. Maybe this is just me, although I'm guessing not if you've clicked on this video and you also struggle with over-explaining and sending long paragraphs of text. People care in as much as it affects them. And I can build things up in my head quite quickly, and I can be like, oh my gosh, this is so awful. I can't believe I'm letting this person down. I can't believe this thing happened and now I have to deal with it. I need to like show how sorry I am. I need to make it clear that whatever. But really, most people don't care that much. And as long as you're upfront, maybe you give them enough notice, or you just say, I'm really sorry. That's it. And you don't over-explain it, but you just say what the situation is in a few lines. Most people will be like, okay, that's annoying. But most people will adapt quite quickly to that and be like, okay, she said she was going to do this, but she can't. Fine. This is the other thing where you again have to assume that people are going to act in good faith, and it can be annoying because there are definitely people out there who would then get annoyed at you and be like, oh, I can't believe she did this. But it's like, that's not your people then. Like, that's not a friend, right? A real friend, if you say, oh, I'm really sorry, last minute, I can't make it, they'll be like, oh, that's a shame, but we'll see you next time. Anyone who then starts complaining, that's not someone that you really want to be around anyway. That's not someone that you would want to people please, or that you would want to control your reaction to anyway. Like, you don't want that kind of person to be your friend. So when you stop over explaining, you will see people's reaction to you and see it for what it is, because you'll just be speaking plainly, being like, this is what happened, this is the truth, do with it what you will. They will either fill in the gaps and be like, oh my gosh, she's lying, or she made up this, blah blah blah, or they'll be like, they'll take you at your word and be like, oh, okay, we move on. Like, that's fine. It's fine. People don't care. And if they do care, you don't need to associate with them. I think something that is difficult to balance as well with this stopping over explaining is that there can be this thing of like, match their energy. I don't think that's great advice. So when I'm saying like, stop oversharing, you only have to say, sorry, can't do it. Like, obviously I don't mean literally say, sorry, can't do it. I am like a very earnest person. Like, I do want to use more words than necessary to send a message, right? I don't have to over explain it, but like, I'm very earnest and I'm gonna be like apologetic about things. I'm not just gonna be quite blunt about it. Although we have to remember as well that if you're typing, like if this is a message that you're sending to someone, there will be different ways to interpret the tone of it, as opposed to if you like call someone and say, look, I'm really sorry. That could be a little useful loophole if you are not yet ready to stop over explaining. If you call someone and say, I can't make it, you can give like a potted summary of it on the phone call of like, oh my gosh, this happened, I'm so sorry. And you can hear the person be like, it's fine, no worries. And then you can move on with it. So that is like a loophole if you're not ready yet to stop over explaining, is to stop at least sending like massive paragraphs of text, or stop over explaining in text messages and just call someone and be like, this is the situation, because then you can explain it. But it's also probably going to go for them in one ear out the other, right? Because people don't care that much. They will take it on board and they'll take on board what affects the situation at hand, but they're not going to remember all of the ins and outs of the thing the explanation, the over explanation that you just gave them. It's not necessarily about you have to stop doing this. It's bad, but you will know, like, if you feel like it is taking a lot of energy, if you are like writing out multiple texts in your notes app to try and make sure you say the right thing, then you will know like, oh, okay, I do need to stop over explaining. And like I say, it is a question of trust. You've got to trust that other people are going to interpret what you're saying in good faith and take it at face value, and not second guess you or think, oh, she's making it up or she's lying or whatever. There will definitely be people like that, unfortunately, but that's why it's also a control thing of like you wanting to over explain to like cover every base and be like, they can't say this, they can't say this, they can't say this because I've over-explained all of it. Calm down. You don't need to put all of that energy into managing other people's expectations of you or managing what they think of you. All you can do is do the right thing for you. So if the right thing is to say, sorry, can't make it, you say that and you give whatever explanation is suitable for whatever situation it is. You move on. You don't second guess yourself. You don't make assumptions about what they think of you. You don't over explain why you need a rest day or why you can't make it because your mental health is bad. You just assume or trust. You trust that they will understand what that means using their own context. It may not be the same as you, but they will have some context for it. You might be like, oh, I have to make it clear that my mental health is so bad. That's why I can't make it. It's like, okay, you can just say whatever and they will make of it what they will. I guess it's difficult as well because you want, at least for me, I don't want it to seem like I'm just making an excuse to not do something. It's like, no, I really do want to see you, but over explanation of all of these things happening. But that comes back to being someone of integrity and showing your good character through being consistent. And so like, okay, you miss one thing, but you're not going to miss the next few things because you're like, that was a one-off, like I wasn't feeling good. I do really want to see you. And then you consistently show up. I barely feel like I covered all of those in enough detail, so I may well be doing another episode of this, especially in terms of like building trust with yourself. I'm thinking of doing one about self-doubt. That plays into a lot of this lack of trust and building trust with yourself and other people's expectations of you. I hope you've got something from this video and it's resonated with you in some way. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I will leave my stop oversharing video on the screen if you'd like to check that out. God bless. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next one.